It's a victory Monday in Houston as the Texans go into the jungle and beat the Bengals. CJ Stroud is the front runner for MVP. We're going to talk about that and more on this edition of The Bullpen.
To throw the punches away. He floats one wide open, and there he goes. Tagged down for a Texan touchdown.
The Texans won, and that is an amazing feeling. I'm James Roy. This is Tom Chavarria, and this is the bullpen. Welcome in, Tom. How do you feel about the game? It got a little choppy there at the end, but the Texans did it. How does it feel to have a quarterback who doesn't need more than 2 minutes to do whatever it is that he does, right? Like that is it. I never felt like we were out of the game. I felt like it got away, but at the end of the day, I mean, how do you feel about it?
I think it is always nice to be able to have a quarterback that can do the things at the end of a game, that clutch gene. You hope they never have to use it, but you definitely hope they have it in their tool bag to go to be able to pull out a win the same way CJ Stroud did. It was an amazing victory from the sense that you went from incredibly confident to incredibly fearful to holy crap, they're going to give this game away to getting it done. I mean, if you watched it, you know exactly what I mean. Emotions were on the roller coaster the entire way through. A great performance, though. There were some huge performances in the game, and I did not see it. I'll be the first to admit I was wrong. I thought that the Texans would go in. They would look good. I thought that they would come out gaining respect for playing well against the Cincinnati Bengals. I did not see them going in there and for a good chunk of the game dominating, actually imposing their will, turnovers, 3 and outs, having great defensive drives, being able to move the ball up and down the field. I mean, they scored 30 points, but I feel like they could have scored 40 points, if things would have went one way or the other. So I'm incredibly impressed, incredibly proud of this team, and what a time to be a Texan fan.
Yeah, no, you and I both predicted a loss. I feel like to some extent I don't want to say we both thought the Texans were going to lose, right? Like, I agree with you that in general in your train of thought, but I feel like at some point as a fan, right, it's just part of being a fan where you're like, well, I can't predict them to win because then they're going to lose in a game that, like, I feel like they should lose. I don't know, like, but I do think that of all the games this season that they have, this Bengals game was their biggest challenge, and it was, I think, the most reasonable for both of us to predict a loss. So I think it was more within the being a realist side of things than that, but I just personally feel like there's some part of me as a fan, like, I guess I don't know, with our predictions this season, we both predicted the Texans to beat the Jaguars, I want to say, or no, I think I took the Jaguars over the Texans too. So I mean, I don't know. I all that to say, being a fan, there's all kinds of those superstitious things that happen, and I felt like that kind of played into our predictions a little bit. Maybe not yours. It was kind of with mine. I kind of felt like I had to pick the Bengals, otherwise the Texans were going to lose. And so, but I mean, I also did reasonably believe the Bengals could have won that game. And there was points where the Texans tried to give it to them. I mean, on 3rd and 3 with the ball, all you have to do is get a first down and close the game out with 4 minutes left. You roll right, and I mean, that's probably the least intelligent throw I've seen CJ make in his entire career so far, and that's saying something. I mean, it was Tony Romo-esque in the timing of it too. It was very much like Tony Romo. If you haven't heard me say it yet, is one of the highest rated regular season passers in NFL history. But the timing of his mistakes is always just stunningly awful. Throughout his entire career, he was just, oh wow, it's 2 minutes left, the Cowboys are up, and then oh wow, interception, Tony Romo. Now the Cowboys are gonna lose, and so that was the timing of that. And so I kind of was like, are we getting a CJ that is going to, make the mistake at the worst possible time? But there's no trend to that. It just happened, and then he fixed it. I mean, I said it early in the game when he had that second, I'm going to throw the air quotes on it, fumble, where the officials didn't, quite dust off their glasses before they reviewed the film. But when he had that, I definitely felt like, I definitely felt like CJ was kind of trying to work through it and fix his mistakes. and I felt like the defense turned to him on the sidelines. I said it on Twitter, but they turned him on the sidelines and they said, "Hey, we got you." And so I feel like they did the same thing there. Obviously, to less of an extent, the Bengals managed to figure something out. But the officiating I felt like played heavy in this game. Do you agree or disagree? I mean, I definitely feel like there was some calls where it felt like the officiating just wasn't all the way there. I didn't want it wouldn't have been the same as the Panthers game or other games we've had where I would have blamed it at the end, but there was definitely some calls that I felt like just didn't quite that had an impact on the game. I don't know. Do you disagree?
I don't really think so. I feel like the game was pretty fairly called both ways. There was a call this way that probably shouldn't have went that way. There was a call for the Texans against the Texans. I didn't necessarily leave that game thinking, man, the officiating stuck out to me. Did they make a couple calls I didn't agree with? Yes. Did I feel like it was so egregious that I couldn't get over it that, we're going to spend Monday talking about the officiating? No. And to get back to earlier where you talked about, we both kind of felt, the Texans were going to lose. Look, I'll be the first to tell you, I want to sit here and say they're going to go 17-0 and never lose. However, a young team that's got to learn to do it, you kind of have to feel like there's going to be games where a veteran-led squad that has went through those battles and fought those wars is going to come out on top. And I think like in my prediction, that was kind of what I expected Cincinnati to do. You had cool Joe Burrow. You had Jamar Chase. I know it was a little dicey at times, but he was there. He still looked good. He still looked the part. And I felt like they were just going to find a way to get it done at home because they'd been one of the hottest teams in the league. They'd won 5 straight. They'd beat 2 juggernauts to get there. So I really felt like this was a game that they weren't going to sleep on. They were going to take the Texans very seriously because people had started talking to them about it. They were like, hey, is this a trap game? Because they've got a huge divisional battle coming up with Baltimore next week. And they're like, no, we've seen the Texans and we see what CJ's doing and we understand. So I fully believe that this was a game that they didn't let off the gas. This was more about the Texans kind of coming of age a little bit. The defense looked really good for huge chunks of that game. The offense, I don't know what more you can say about the offense. What are we going to do when Nico comes back? And you got to do something with Noah Brown now. Like that.
Noah Brown performed with Nico there, though. I mean, I don't think that Nico affects Noah Brown's workload. Noah Brown is just emerging, and there's a lot of Cowboys fans going, wait, where was this Noah Brown when he was on our team?
Well, I would say that Noah Brown performed when somebody was out. So yes, last week he performed with Nico, but Robert Woods was out. This week,
that's true.
He was there with Robert Woods, and Nico was out. So he became that outside threat that you had to go to. And now, if you have your full complement of wide receivers, who gets fed first in that offense? Does Noah Brown then take 2 pegs back? So
I think it's interesting to see because early in the season he was very much slotted in what people thought Tank Dell's role was going to be. He went out injured and Tank Dell took up that role. And then when he came back, Robert Woods was out, I believe. There may have been a couple games where that overlapped, but with Robert Woods out, you're right. That was where he found his role initially. And then now that Nico Collins is out, he still performed very highly. He's one of 3 Texans wide receivers to have over 150 yards in back-to-back games. The other 2, in case you didn't know, I bet you can guess, but they're DeAndre Hopkins and Andre Johnson, 2 Texans legends. So very good company to be in as a receiver on this team. But to look at where he fits, it's just interesting to see because Tank Dell was in this game and he performed. So I think a lot of people perceived him to be what Tank Dell is, but I think their skill sets overlap. But I feel like there's room for him to pick up. He's more of a chameleon. I feel like he kind of fits where he's needed. His usage is very versatile. He's not just doing one thing or the other. Like Nico gets a lot of, I believe it was outbreaking routes. He does get some across the middle, but like for the most part, they're catching him on the outside. A lot of Tank Dell's work is deep, and then he gets some run work. But I mean, to answer your question, I just don't. I don't know. I think the Texans are very good at playing the hot hand. So regardless of who's healthy and who's not, the Texans will play. It just really affects. So in this game, Xavier Hutchinson got a lot of play time, or at least more than he has, and he made good use of it. But Xavier Hutchinson's a guy who won't see a snap whenever Nico Collins is back, and then John Mechie got like maybe one snap. That's been the trend. He gets like one or two snaps a game, and so those are the guys that'll suffer when everyone's healthy. And then the receiver that eats will be the one that CJ's finding. I mean I don't know. I don't know. Do you think that there's someone who suffers when all of them are there?
Oh, absolutely. I gotta believe, in my opinion, it's going to be Dalton Schultz. I
Oh
think
yeah.
I think he's the guy that gets lost in all of this because now he becomes more of a blocker. But I disagree with you in the sense that Nico and Noah are the same dude because they play two different positions on the field.
Oh, I don't think
Where
Nico and no. I said Nico and Tank.
I'm sorry,
I I
my
didn't say
God.
I maybe I did. Maybe I misspoke, but
Yeah.
I
Nico
didn't
and
say.
Noah, I'm sorry. I feel like they play a similar outside receiver
Okay.
where Tank is in the slot more often than not.
No,
So
yeah.
I don't think Tank's workload is affected by Noah as much as Nico's is, because I feel like whatever side of the field your outside guy is, that's where CJ is going to tend to funnel his work. That's why Nico had big games, I think, in my opinion, because he's on that side of the field. I mean, CJ is going to pepper the ball everywhere, right? But I believe formationally speaking, whoever's opposite of the play, he's probably not going to make it back to him, and it'll probably be Noah now as opposed to Nico when Nico comes back.
Yeah, no, okay. I see. I think we had a miscommunication there, but I can see it where Noah is built kind of similarly to Nico. Nico's a little bigger, but when he was kept on the roster, that's where I thought he more fit from a build perspective. And so early on in the season, the Texans' usage of him was reminiscent of what we've seen from Nico Collins or from Tank Dell. And so then watching Tank perform with him on the field, I think was our indicator of what I think we all probably knew to be true, which is that they're not the same receiver. Um, but speaking of, you said Dalton Schultz maybe becoming more of a blocker. I'd like to talk, and we haven't really touched on it yet, but it's a very important topic. Devin Singletary is the first Texan, I believe, in 12 games. I want to say. I may be off on that. I mean, think I'm mixing statistics in my head, but the important part is he rushed for 150 yards. Now, I put out a poll on Twitter. The overwhelming majority of people, I put three options. I probably should have put four. But I asked, is it the Bengals defense? Is it Devin Singletary? Is it the offensive line? The fourth option I should have put was the Texans passing game. But what gave way to Devin Singletary having the game that he did? And so I personally, I mean, I thought Devin Singletary did a good job of freezing defenders with his first cut, and that was something we hadn't been seeing a lot in the past few games from him. And so that to me was major. It was as I said, rocket fuel to the run game. But yeah, yeah. Shout out to the Rockets. Be the Nuggets. Reigning champs. All right. Future champs. The Rockets are. I believe it. Um, but Devin Singletary to me was the X factor. I feel like the left side of the line picked it up a lot. It was a culmination of things, but if I'm looking at the primary factor, to me it was Devin Singletary and his ability to get where he needed to be. Do you think that was the case?
I personally think that this was a lot about two things. One, CJ Stroud has built up such a resume. I mean, 470 yards, 5 touchdowns a week prior, that he commanded more respect in the secondary. That they were playing probably more two deep safety type looks, less guys on the line of scrimmage. And then this offensive line, this is what, maybe the third game in a row we've got the same five guys. So I believe that they're starting to gel a little bit. I also don't think the Cincinnati Bengals, I'm sorry. I don't know why I had the Browns stuck in my head. I don't think they're a premier run defense. And when you talk about some of the games leading in, a lot of these other teams had really good run defenses. So now they finally get a little bit easier competition. And oh, by the way, you've got this air threat that they didn't have before that's getting more respect. Now it's easier. Like you talked to in the beginning of the season, you were saying, I think they need to pass to open up the run. I think effectively what this last couple of weeks has done that in a sense that teams are game planning to or scheming to stop CJ and less to stop whoever's in the backfield.
Yeah, I think that's a big factor of it, and I alluded to that. Someone had brought that up. That's the reason that I thought to bring up the passing to open up the run. And I feel like definitely the threat of CJ as a passer helped early on in the game. I can agree with that. That's hard to disagree with. Um, I definitely think that the last time that we saw Singletary perform at least close to this well was in the game against the Panthers, and that was just a team that had a bad run defense, and so he had like 50 something rush yards, and combined with Damian Pierce for a 100-yard rushing game. I believe it may have been just shy of that, but I believe it was a 100-yard rushing game. And so with that, I think we can attribute a significant portion of it to the Bengals, but I do agree that the pass to open up the run has been a big part of it. But I just can't discount what Singletary did in that game. I was watching him, he hit one cut, and I was watching defenders just like quake in their boots, just like flat footed, just not ready for what he was doing. And so maybe it's just all of those factors contributing to one another that led to this run game looking as good as it did. But man, it didn't look good today. I can't wait to see Damian Pierce. Like, and I'm not saying all of this to like discount Damian Pierce. Damian Pierce's return to this the running offense, if it looks like it did this week, next week, will make it look even better. Like I have no doubt that Damian Pierce brings something to this run game that would like we would have ran for 200 yards on the Bengals with Damian Pierce back there, um, combined between him and Singletary.
To add some statistics to that, the through week 9, the Cincinnati Bengals are ranked 27th in run defense of 32 teams. They give up 129.8 yards a game, and they have allowed 7 touchdowns. So
Mm.
this is not, and in contrast, when you look at some of the better teams, the Falcons that they played, where we question the run game, 14th. Let me go further in. The Jaguars are 4th. So when you start looking at some of these teams that they've played, the Ravens are 8th. It's like it's amazing when you start to think about, okay, who they've played and how successful they are at stopping the run. Well, we think we have a problem with our own team being unable to run the football, where maybe they're just running into some really good defenses.
No, yeah, I can agree with that, but it is a positive sign, and I think that CJ stood to benefit a lot from the run game doing well. I think that as much as the passing game helped the run game getting there, it forced the Bengals into this awkward defensive stance where they kind of were playing halfway between the two. They weren't fully sure what the Texans were going to do, and it was opening up the passing game. And there was a lot of times where CJ maybe wasn't as accurate as he usually is, but he had all day, all the space. And another thing that I noticed was when CJ was booting, it was is giving me Andre Johnson, Matt Schaub vibes with the when they used to boot him out, and the whole defense is like nowhere to be seen, no pass rush, nothing going. And even when they had it, CJ was elusive as all get out. That was one of his biggest knocks coming into the league, and he's just been. I could go on. I'm gonna start rambling if I keep going down that rabbit hole. But the run game looked great. I'd be interested to see Titus Howard and specifically the left side of the offensive line's PFF grade as it pertains to run blocking from this past week. So I'll be interested to see how that shakes out. I bet Patrick Storm will have that out to us in due time on Twitter. So excited to see that. Another big point, you said the defense, you mentioned them, did really well today. I agree with you. There were some plays. I don't know if you saw Denzel Perryman tweeted after the game. He was like, "Don't come after me for my mistakes. We won the game." Blah blah blah. So I didn't think it needed to be said. I mean, I think it would have been a point of contention if we had lost. I think some people might have been coming into his mentions to bring it up, but I mean, at the end of the day, all the plays that he made that were mistakes, I felt like they weren't. I didn't think they were end all be all. I wasn't super frustrated with his performance today. He was asked to do a lot, and I mean, he showed up. That's all you can ask for. He's just playing the game to the best of his ability. I don't have any problems with the way he played. But let's talk about these 2 interceptions that the Texans had on back-to-back drives. Now, this is where I thought they put it away. I definitely thought that after these 2 possessions that, CJ was going to drive us down the field, get us a first down, get us out of there. And we got a little extra football at the end that we didn't really need or ask for, but I'm happy to see it. Um, but so we have Shaquille Griffith has the second one. The first one is from DeAndre Houston Carson. And in case you didn't know, I was on my phone just a second ago looking up to make sure I could say that right because this guy who's called up from the practice squad at some point this season. He might be signed to the active roster with as many injuries as the Texans have. I'm not fully sure, but what a fortuitous bounce off of the tight end for him. That was a real heads up play. What do you make of the Texans as a whole? I guess I say all this to get into the turnover differential. So the Texans had a few off plays earlier where CJ, like I said, there was the fumble and then there was the earlier fumble. All plays that took away points from the Texans. Um, do you think that the Texans defense getting those turnovers was significant, like huge? I feel like it was huge for the flow of the game, even if the Texans offense didn't close the game out immediately. That without those, I don't think we see the same result that we saw right now. I mean, how do you feel about it?
I totally agree. I think it's interesting. I know at the beginning of the season, I came on here and said that the Texans weren't good enough to lose the turnover battle and win football games. And then all they did was shut me up by doing that in, I think, consecutive games. And what's amazing to me is, like, you're right. The two turnovers didn't necessarily determine the game per se, but I believe each one kind of stopped the flow of momentum where Cincinnati wanted to get their crowd back into it, wanted to get on the front foot, have the Texans kind of pedaling a little bit. And each time the Texans defense came up with a turnover that kind of stemmed that so that they were able to, you know, I guess outlast Cincinnati, because eventually Cincinnati did get it going. Um, I don't know what more needs to be said. I mean, I really appreciate Grenard, your guy. I think he had an amazing game. I know Laramie Tunsil quote tweeted something after the game with the
Pay the
money
man.
bag. Yep.
Pay the man.
I know people are not going to want to hear it, but Will Anderson played a hell of a game. I think he impacted so many plays. He forced Joe Burrow into running the ball where I think he was trying to, buy time for Boyd and Chase to get open, things of that nature. Um, as much as Denzel Perryman had to go and defend himself, you hit it on the head perfectly. Like, all his mistakes were in coverage, like deep coverage, like linebackers covering tight ends and slot wide receivers, 15, 20 yards down the field. Most linebackers can't do that. So it's a rare breed to be able to do it. I think Denzel got hit with a couple penalties where I would have been like, I know the one in the back of the end zone, they talked about it on the broadcast, which I was kind of interested in, why they kind of talked about it and stopped, because once he went out of bounds, he technically he can't be
He can't be first one to touch the ball.
well, no, he can't be interfered with because he went out of bounds.
Oh,
So they were talking about how you're taught to, like, that's an old school move. Once he goes out of bounds, oh no, you check
Fair
him
game.
so he can't get in, and then they end up calling pass interference. And they were talking at it, and I was like, how come they didn't push that any further? But it is what it is. It worked out. So
I mean,
uh,
there was that one play where someone mentioned it on Twitter. I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Sarge or someone. I thought I saw someone say it. But if Jimmy Ward was starting, that's one of those points where you see the inexperience of our free safety in this game. But I believe that was Houston Carson who had the interception. But so Denzel Perryman there was a play where Joe Burrow scrambled, kind of made some time, and Perryman was covering, I believe, Jamar Chase, and so he was holding him good until the play kind of broke, and when Burrow broke the pocket, the safety wasn't there to help him out, or he got there late. And there was a lot of people saying that if Jimmy Ward was playing, Jimmy Ward as an experienced veteran and not like someone coming up off the practice squad from this week, probably would have been more in position to help him on that play. So I don't blame Denzel Perryman for having to cover literally the best receiver on the other team for a short amount of time, and then after that time was up, him getting away from him. I mean, he's a linebacker playing against one of the bar none best receivers in the entire game right now. So I mean,
always open.
I mean, yeah. So I don't have any problem with that. I'd like you talked about the D line a little bit. Texans had 4 sacks today. And you talked about Grenard. Grenard was in on one of them. You know who had the other 3?
I do, and his name escapes me because they uh interior lineman.
Malik Collins, I believe
Thank
it
you.
was. Yes, Malik Collins had 3 sacks today, and there was one. The most impressive one to me was when he got in. Now you can check me because it might have been Sheldon Rankins.
That's who it was. I was
Was
like,
it
no, no,
Sheldon
no.
Rankins?
Yeah. It was Rankins. I was like, that doesn't sound right. And then I
Okay.
was like, and then the more you said his name, I was like, that doesn't sound right. I was going right to my
I
phone.
was torn between the two and
Yep.
I couldn't remember. Okay, Sheldon Rankins. The most impressive one was when he got into the backfield. He hit Burrow. Burrow shook him off, and he stood up and he ran and chased down Burrow and got him again and put him down further in the backfield. I thought that was super impressive. For as people, both of us collectively, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I'm going to be right here. Have complained very heavily about the D line. I have at points said that they do a really good job of clogging the space in the middle, which is a big part of their job. But overall, their pass rush and their run stopping has been meh. And if you look at any PFF graphic of the entire Texans team, you're going to see a lot of yellow and orange, which I believe are the two colors that describe the lesser players in PFF size. You're going to see the interior D line show up in those colors on that graphic. It's one of the few weak spots on the team. So for them to come through in such a major way, um, is amazing. I mean, I don't know if you look at the pass rush. I believe in the pass rush numbers, it's a similar argument to Will Anderson, where we're looking at like yards away from the passer when he throws the ball. And for the longest time, all of us are like, "Yeah, that's cool," but like, can he hit the quarterback? And so to see him get in there 3 times after all that complaining, you know what? That's good. I'm glad to see it, and I'm glad that you were listening to the bullpen, which is a good plug. You know, if Malik Collins and Sheldon Rankins listen to the bullpen, which they don't, but if they did, then you should listen to it. But they don't. But you should still. That's my personal in-show plug for the podcast you are actively listening to. If you're at this point in the podcast, you're really listening to the podcast. So thank you, and we appreciate you. Um, Special teams. Matt Amendola comes up. They kept mentioning his XFL experience, but I feel like I remember seeing him on an NFL roster before that. But they were really honing in on his XFL experience. They were like, yeah, he was in the XFL. Every time he went out to kick a field goal, and he squeaked some by. There was some really nerve-wracking kicks from him today, but kudos to him with the game-winning field goal and barely squeaking in the uprights. Be honest with me, Tom. When you saw that first kick from him, how long into the kick was it before you were like, "Oh, this is good"?
The camera angles did not do us any favors. They because every one of them, it was like the camera was like slightly to the right, so it kind of comes across your face, and that other upright, our left, their right, it just felt like it was going to go wide. I mean, even with the other kicker, a couple times that he kicked it, so you never got that good from behind view. And then the one time you did, he squeaked it in, like you said, that one side, and I'm like, oh boy,
Ugh.
please let this guy pan out. And he did great. I mean, I don't know what more you can ask. He made everything they asked him to kick, and I hope he can keep doing it. I don't want to rush Kaimi back if you don't have to,
He's already
because
on IR, so
yeah,
he's not back anytime. We're gonna see a lot more of
yeah.
Matt Amendola. I feel like so. One thing that came up to me though last week was they mentioned the reason that Cam Johnston can't do field goals is because he's Australian football style, so he doesn't actually do like place kicking. He's never done it, and I feel like personally, like I love Cam Johnston to death, but if I'm roster building for an NFL team and I'm not carrying a backup kicker, I'm thinking to myself, my punter had better be able to make a field goal. I'm like, hey, you can kick the ball, you can really boot it, but like, can you kick a field goal? And if he says no, I'm contemplating if I want him to be my punter, or at least kick it off. Like he didn't even have to be my field goal, but they had to have Dario Obungo like kick off the ball because Cam Johnston literally can't do that. And this is me being a Madden keyboard warrior loser probably, but I mean like on Madden, whenever your kicker gets injured, they don't go, "Oh well, your punter is Australian." Like on Madden, if I pull Cam Johnston out, I'm gonna put him in at kickoff, and they're gonna make it out like he can do it. They need to adjust his ratings. They need to make a rating for guys like that so that you can get the real true NFL experience. Sorry for standing on my soapbox and having this rant about how our punter can't kick field goals, but here we are. It's hard to complain about anything with the way the Texans have been this entire existence that we've had. I mean, I really wish I would have taken the Texans to win because I wish I could have given like a nice storybook ending instead of whatever I delivered last week. Because when
No
I don't pick
way,
them to win, I don't get to give like a nice storybook ending.
no way you had that one queued up. I'm sorry.
Oh no, there was zero chance I had get 2 interceptions, be up by 10 points, give up a pick, almost six, give up a touchdown, and then let them drive down and kick a field goal, and get saved by Tyler Boyd dropping the ball in the end zone on what was probably I want to say one of the easiest catches I've ever seen. I'm obviously not an NFL. Once again, loser Madden keyboard warrior dude here who's never caught an NFL ball. Best catch I ever made was in practice in high school as a freshman. So do with that what you will. Um, but I mean that was insane, an insanely easy catch. It's one of those things that proves that like very easily any given Sunday the game could go one way or the other, and we were really close to it going. I mean, but with that in mind, the Texans' game plan, if the touchdown had happened, probably would have been slightly different. But and then there was that Tank Dell drop on the following possession, and that was frustrating to say the least. But oh well. Um, I mean, it's been great talking about this game. Do you have any other points that you'd like to make? Any final comments before we send the good people home to enjoy their day?
I really, really, really would like to sit here and tell you, Stroud MVP candidate. I called it. I can't say that I did. Only James has that honor. But I do believe there is a scenario that the momentum that he is gaining right now with each win could potentially put him in the legitimately in the mix for MVP, which is otherworldly for a rookie that's 22 years old to just come to the worst team, one of the worst teams in football, and just instantly make them that good, which proves when you have a quarterback, things are different.
When you
And
find a quarterback, you find a good thing. That's me paraphrasing the Bible, but replacing woman with quarterback. There we go. When you find a quarterback, you find a good thing. Look in Proverbs, find it. No, October 4th, I have objective quality evidence. For those of you who don't know, that's like something that tells you that something objectively happened in my field of work. But I have some very good evidence that I started the conversation of, hey, should CJ Stroud be in the MVP candidacy at least 3 weeks before Dan Orlovsky, Texans legend and our national media champion of CJ Stroud, started that conversation, which was a week ago. So a little bit ahead of the curve. To put some perspective on it, Jim Brown won the MVP as a rookie in 1957. That was 10 years, around 10 years before the NFL merged with the AFL and started the Super Bowl era. So in the Super Bowl era, a rookie's never won the MVP. Jim Brown was a running back, possibly one of the best players to ever play the game. So it speaks volumes that he won it. Also, in a time where the quarterback wasn't a sure thing to win MVP, is probably the only opening where that possibly could have happened. But one of the things working for CJ Stroud here is that he is a quarterback. He is bar none the best quarterback this season. I can look at every quarterback that's playing right now, and I can say that at this point he is the important thing. And as much as I hate to agree with Stephen A, but it's true to some extent. This team last week when he was talking about it was 4-4, sitting at 500. A 500 team that doesn't make the playoffs doesn't get the MVP. We learned that with J.J. Watt having one of the best defensive seasons ever, losing to Aaron Rodgers, who had just a run-of-the-mill Aaron Rodgers season. So C.J. Stroud, you're right, needs to build on this performance, needs to continue winning, and needs to take this team to the playoffs. If the Texans make the playoffs and CJ Stroud performs the way he is right now and continues to carry that forward, he will win the MVP. And if he doesn't, we riot. Stroud boys assemble.
I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead of the bullpen or the fans or myself or anything like that. But it is impossible for me. It's impossible right now for me to look at the remaining schedule and A, not feel that they can win every game, and B, not feel that they won't be favored in probably 90% of them. So if he turns around and takes a 3-14 Texan team and they win 12 games, in what world does he not win it on that merit alone?
I agree. And then you talk about D'Amico Ryans being in the coach of the year conversation. That's a whole
Absolutely.
nother discussion, but he's certainly in it. Those two are firmly in the end. You know, there are still people asking, has CJ Stroud locked up offensive rookie of the year? I could have said 3 weeks ago that CJ Stroud could stop playing football for the rest of the year and win offensive rookie of the year. There's just not a lot of competition in that category, and he is head and shoulders above anyone who is considering being offensive rookie of the year. They better reconsider and try and just play good football, because CJ Stroud is the offensive rookie of the year. He will win offensive rookie of the year, and he is in the MVP discussion. And in my mind, I may be a little biased, he is the front runner for MVP. In a position that's dominated by quarterbacks, it's hard to say. There are people putting Lamar Jackson ahead of him. I don't know if you saw the performance Lamar Jackson put up. I've seen the performances Lamar Jackson's put up all season, and I couldn't have put Lamar Jackson ahead of CJ Stroud last week, let alone after the performance that CJ Stroud put up this week. It's just hard to do, in my opinion. But
The
maybe I'm
easy
coming on a little strong.
the easy argument for that is he is the best player on what was the best team. I think
Yeah, until they choked
I
against the Browns. But I'm not happy about that
not at all.
because I wanted them to win. I have some stuff hanging in the balance, like a free jersey from my supervisor at work, who is a Browns fan. But he was a Browns fan before Deshaun, and he didn't like Deshaun, so I'll give him that credit. But I guess on that note, we can bring this show to a close. It's been real, it's been fun, but was it all real fun? It was. Spoiler alert. Um, I am at M1 Texans fan. You can find me all over social media at that, and that's how you can find the YouTube channel for this podcast. Tom is Third Coast Tom. We're both on the PSF app, and for the next 3 weeks straight, although I guess technically in the middle of that stretch, I will be at the game. I might check in at halftime, give y'all a view of the game from the game. But hop on the PSF app, download it, get into the Texans chat room, and enjoy the Texans community. We live stream the games. It's a real good time, and it's the future of being a fan. So download the app. If you like what you heard or saw or whatever you did with this today, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, do whatever it is you do on the platform that you are at, and tell a friend of a friend, tell a stranger about this podcast, and let them listen in. I'd like to thank anyone who's listening right now. This is the perfect time to do this since we're really deep in it. So anyone who's here is really a listener of the podcast. Guys, the numbers have been great. I'm not one who does it for the numbers, but it's nice to know that there are people who listen. Tom and I love the Texans. We love Houston sports. H-Town's up. The Dynamo in the Western Conference semifinals. The Rockets just beat the defending champs. The Texans are doing great, and the Astros made the right hire at manager. It's a great time to be a Houston sports fan. And if you listen to the podcast regularly, or even if you don't and you're considering, I appreciate you giving it the time of day, because it just means a lot to me. I bet it means a lot to Tom. I don't want to speak for him, but I know that he likes doing this, and he appreciates you guys tuning in and listening to us talk about the Texans.
What he said, all of that.
All of that.
Short and sweet. He said plenty. What he said, 100%.
Ditto. But on that note, I'll stop rambling about how much I appreciate you guys, and I'll just let you get about your day. So thanks for listening, and until next time, H-Town forever. Go Texans. Vamos, Tex!